November 1953. The Twin Towers of Wembley stand against a cold, gray sky. 105,000 people are packed inside, their breath turning to mist. This is the fortress, the home of football's masters. For 90 years, England had hosted the world here and never lost to a team from beyond the British Isles. The script was known. Visitors arrived, they respected the occasion, and they were duly beaten by English grit. But today the visitors wore deep red, and they had brought a different story. 45 seconds, that's all it took. The Hungarian number 9, Nandor Hidekuti, does something strange. He doesn't lead the line, he floats away from it, into a pocket of space nobody thought to guard. The ball finds him at the edge of the English penalty area. A quick touch, a swing of the right foot, and the heavy leather ball flies low past the dive of Gil Merrick. The net ripples. The stadium falls silent. England, the masters, were behind at home before the game had even truly begun. This wasn't just a match, it was a clash of worlds. English football was born of muddy pitches and fierce local pride. It was built on strength, speed, and strict positions. A center half was a stopper. A winger stayed wide. The WM formation was gospel, passed down through generations. The players were professionals, but part-time by modern standards. But the visitors, the mighty Magyars, were a different breed. They were reigning Olympic champions, unbeaten in over 3 years. They did not just bring players, they brought a way to play, honed in a system that was years ahead of its time. On that day, Wembley wasn't just a football pitch, it was a courtroom, and the old English way of playing was on trial for its life. The architect of this revolution was Gusztáv Sebes. More than a coach, he was a deputy minister of sport in Hungary's government. This gave him unprecedented power. He could centralize the country's best talent, basing his national team around the brilliant club side, Budapest Honvéd, which meant his core players trained together every single day. He commanded his players for weeks at a time, holding intensive training camps. Sebes ran his team like a scientific project. He drilled tactical patterns until they were second nature. He insisted on peak physical fitness, on diet, on discipline. It was a state-sponsored vision of football's future, a socialist football where the collective was everything, and players were not fixed to one role, but were universal parts of a fluid, attacking machine. On paper, both sides look similar. They both use the WM formation, 3 at the back, 2 halfbacks, 2 inside forwards, and a front 3. England stuck to it rigidly with strict man marking. Each player had a job and a zone. But Hungary's formation was just a suggestion, a starting point from which to move. Theirs was a living, breathing shape. Their center forward, Hidekuti, did not stay high, he dropped deep into midfield. Their right half, József Boszczyk, did not just defend, he surged forward to join the attack. Their wingers held the width, pinning England's fullbacks. The neat English grid began to tilt, pulled out of shape by a team that refused to stand still. They treated the formation not as a set of positions, but a set of problems for the opposition to solve. This created an impossible dilemma, and it started with England's captain, the great Billy Wright. As a classic center half, his job was to mark the opposing center forward. So when Hidekuti dropped 20 yards off the front line, Wright had a terrible choice. Should he follow him into midfield, leaving a huge hole in the heart of his defense? Or should he hold his position, leaving Hungary's most dangerous player completely free? He chose to follow his man. He had to. It was the rule he had played by his entire life. But in that moment, he triggered a fatal chain reaction. The moment Wright stepped out, the defensive line was broken. The other English defenders could not cover the space. Why? Because they were also following their rules, man-marking the 2 Hungarian inside forwards, Ferenc Puskás and Sándor Kocsis. With Wright dragged out of the way, these 2 masters of movement now had wide-open channels to run into. A simple diagonal pass bypassed the entire English midfield and defense. England's rigid, man-for-man system meant that once one piece was moved, the entire structure fell like dominoes. The Magyars weren't just attacking a defense, they were dismantling a philosophy, one pass at a time. They were playing checkers against an opponent who had invented chess. England did land one punch. Jackie Sewell scrambled an equalizer, and for a moment, Wembley breathed again. The relief lasted just 7 minutes. Puskás made it 2-1. Then Hidegkuti, ghosting into space again, made it 3-1. Then came the fourth, a perfect example of the system. With England's defense collapsing backwards to deal with the forwards, the ball was played to the edge of the area. Who was there to meet it? Joseph Bozic, the right half, arriving like a train to hammer it home. A defender had become an attacker. Alf Ramsey pulled one back from the penalty spot, but at halftime the scoreboard read, England 2, Hungary 4. The game wasn't just being lost, it was being explained. Then, early in the second half, came the moment that became a symbol for the entire afternoon. Hungary's fifth goal. The ball is fizzed into Ferenc Puskás inside the English box. He kills it dead with one touch. Billy Wright lunges in for a heroic, desperate block. In that split second, Puskás produces a piece of magic from another dimension. As Wright commits, Puskás uses the sole of his left foot to drag the ball back, pulling it behind his standing leg. Wright, propelled by his own momentum, slides past him into empty space, a fallen hero on the Wembley turf. Puskás is left with a clear sight of goal. He smashes it into the roof of the net. It wasn't just a goal, it was a lesson. Audacity and technique had just defeated raw commitment. A statue had been toppled by a dancer. While Puskás and Hidegkuti wrote the headlines, the whole team was a masterpiece. On the right, the triangle of fullback Buzanski, halfback Bozic, and winger Budaj constantly rotated, creating 3 versus 2 situations that England's left side simply could not solve. And behind them all stood the goalkeeper, Gyula Grosics. Decades before the term was invented, he played as a sweeper keeper. He would stand 10 yards outside his penalty area, intercepting long balls and immediately starting the next attack with a quick, intelligent pass. He compressed the pitch, allowing Hungary to press high, knowing he was there to guard the space behind. He was the first attacker, not the last line of defense. Hidegkuti completed his hat trick to make it 6-2. Stan Mortensen grabbed a late consolation, but the final score, 6-3, felt like a kindness. Contemporary reports suggest Hungary had over 30 shots on goal to England's handful. The 105,000 in the stands were not angry, they were stunned, but also captivated. Many stayed to applaud the visitors off the pitch, a rare tribute from a crowd that had just witnessed a historic humiliation. They knew they had seen the future. Any lingering English doubts were erased 6 months later in the return match in Budapest. This time, Hungary won 7-1. It remains England's heaviest ever defeat. There was no fluke. This was the new order. In coaching offices across Europe, the game was never the same. 6-3 was the scoreline that launched 1,000 tactical theories. The idea of a deep-lying center forward, later christened the false nine, became an obsession. But the influence went deeper. The constant movement, the interchanging of positions, the demand that every player be comfortable on the ball, these were the seeds of the total football that the Dutch would perfect 2 decades later. Rinus Michels, the father of that legendary Ajax and Hollandside, was watching. He saw the principles of fluid space and universal players laid bare at Wembley. From Sebes to Michels, to his student Johan Cruyff, and from Cruyff to Pep Guardiola, a golden thread runs from that Hungarian team to the beautiful game we see today. The goalkeeper who was the first attacker, the midfielder who was a key goal scorer, the forward who created space instead of just occupying it. It all started here. So why do we still speak of the 6-3 in hushed tones? Because it was more than a defeat, it was an education. It was the day the Masters were sent back to school. The sport took a great leap forward on that cold Wembley pitch. A team showed that football could be about intelligence as much as strength, about space as much as positions, about the collective as much as the individual. And a crowd went home knowing the game they loved would never be the same again. If this story reminded you why you fell in love with football, subscribe to Ink Pitch for more of the game's greatest stories, hand-drawn. There are more legends, more nights, and more revolutionary ideas waiting on the channel. We will keep the fire going.